Y'all are sleeping on the best Marvel project right now. It's animated, it's a show, and it's not X-Men 97. Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur feels like a project that would be cancelled. It doesn't feel like something Disney or Marvel would give a chance, but they did. And they don't at the same time. We are on the second season of Moon Girl currently, and I guarantee that half, if not all of the people watching this video have not heard of the show until I mentioned it. Disney and Marvel have put the absolute bare minimum amount of effort into advertising this show, despite it being more inventive and comic booky than half the MCU. This is not going to be a comparison video in any sense of the word, but it is important to highlight how special and unique this show is against the rest of the Marvel is putting out right now, and talk about why it's flying under the radar for most people. A big focal point of Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur's importance historically is that it's the first Marvel TV show ever led by a black woman, period. In an interview with Deadline, Rodney Clouden, supervising producer on the show, said this about it. Just the fact that we have to quantify this by saying that statement alone means that it's been a long time coming, and this needed to happen. Just to have a character like Lunella as Moon Girl, a young black girl that's into STEM, and she's about her family and community, that model of one girl can make a difference. It's a big thing that she's a 13-year-old girl who happens to be a superhero, but she's not just her superpower. Her brain is her superpower. You want another reason this show is awesome in such an unprecedented way? This show only exists because of Lawrence Fishburne. Yes, Lawrence Fishburne of The Matrix. Lawrence Fishburne. It all started with Lawrence Fishburne in a comic book store. He loves comic books and fell in love with Marvel's Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur because he had read Moon Boy and Devil Dinosaur from the 1970s when he was younger. Steve Loader said this in his Deadline interview. I guess it makes sense why Fishburne has been in the collective projects of Man of Steel, BVS, Ant-Man and the Wasp, and now this. He truly loves superheroes and the comic books they hail from. Now the question is, where does Devil Dinosaur and the Moon Mantle originate? Moon Boy and Devil Dinosaur were created by Jack Kirby during his third stint at Marvel Comics. Let's do a little bit of background here. Jack Kirby has a storied history of his little dance between Marvel and DC because both companies were notorious for hampering the grumpy creative genius, whether it was Stan speechifying about all of his contributions to a given Marvel book, while failing to mention Jack's heavy involvement, or its DC literally having someone else draw over Jack the King Kirby's Superman art. I'm never getting over that. Moon Boy and Devil Dinosaur were created after Kirby left DC for the first time. He had just learned DC was doing a Commandy animated series, so in reaction to that, Marvel wanted him to create a series like Commandy to one-up DC. Though the difference between the two series is added in a dino to the mix. Dinos were popular after all. It's the ape logic of Silver Age comics, dinos sell, Goldblum. This original series of Moon Boy and Devil Dinosaur was very short-lived. Moon Boy and Devil Dinosaur was cancelled in 1978, so there were sparing reappearances in other books like Godzilla, King of the Monsters in 79. Yes, Marvel did Godzilla comics. Then the character wasn't heard of or seen until 1986, when The Thing travels to a Pacific island where a Devil Dinosaur film is being made. Devil Dinosaur does not reappear, but Godzilla does crash the party. Beginning with Fallen Angels, a spin-off of the New Mutants, Devil Dinosaur makes sporadic appearances in some Marvel comics. Nothing huge happened with Devil or a prospective partner in crime until 2016. Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur, the comic series, originated out of a new Marvel Comics initiative back in the mid-2010s, where we got a bunch of fresh, new ongoings with some brilliant writers like G. Willow Wilson on the new Miss Marvel, aka Kamala Khan, Ryan North on the unbeatable Squirrel Girl, Jason Aaron on Mighty Thor, and finally we have Amy Reeder and Brandon Montclair on Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur. Marvel now is something very special to me, because it's what got me in deep into Marvel Comics as a whole. I had read some Marvel in passing, the odd Spider-Man issues, some Power Pack, X-Men, Iron Man, but I had never really taken the dive as much as I had with DC. Marvel now changed everything, because it put these fresh, new characters with new spins on classic characters, and made me believe the little kid myth of I could be a hero again. It's important that we see ourselves in the heroes that we watch, that we read about, but that doesn't mean just guys that look like me. We got plenty of those. I think what people miss about representation is that hyperspecificity in telling these stories of people with different backgrounds, different genders, different skin colors than me. That is how we relate. The more specific we get in telling our stories through our art, the universality of it all will shine through. And I think that's what we keep missing. When people complain about representation, they miss the fact that though there are distinct differences between cultures and families and people of different backgrounds, there are just universal qualities to everybody through which we can understand, and the difference is deep in that connection. Quote, to add more about the specificity of things, she's a black girl, and if she was a Latina girl or an Asian girl, there are certain specificities that you can lean on to tell the story. But the subject matter is universal. So it's just that it's the same story, just in a different package. I think the specificity is good just because of being authentic and representing a particular segment of society. Still, the story is universal and relatable to everyone, and I think that makes it work. As for the hair episode, every time we go into a subject, we're trying to see how we can address that visually or written in a unique way and not just the base thing that you've seen before. My favorite Marvel comic book is Miss Marvel, the story of a teenage Pakistani girl in New York, growing through awkward changes. The people that hate those stories say I shouldn't relate to that because I'm a white guy and our differences separate us, but I don't think that's true. I grew up in a religious household, so I understand the restrictions that Kamala's parents put on her, and that they do it out of love and tradition. Kamala's a big freaking nerd, and I am too. Ever since I was a kid, I was reading wiki after wiki on these comic book characters so I can know every single fact about them. I would read whole encyclopedias, and even more, I understand her body's dysmorphia, that I too relate to. But this isn't her video, this is Lunella's. Why is she so important? Quote, starting off, representation matters, and that's something Lawrence said at the beginning of the production that I think resonated heavily, you know? You can't be what you can't see. And I thought that was a really important message for us to go into the production of making the show with that in mind. End quote. The big mission of Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur as a show is something really beautiful to see. Ultimately, it's about putting something indelibly positive into the world, giving kids someone to look up to and see themselves in, and we need that now more than ever. A big part of why this show is so special is I think it fills a void of Saturday morning cartoon fare that has been slowly but surely disappearing through the years, as well as taking cues from shows like Amphibia, Owl House, and Gravity Falls slightly in a thematic way. Now, looking at how the animation moves so smoothly and how slick it is, as well as the unique and varied character designs in the show, one does have to ask, how did this get made? And what are the inspirations? After watching the show, you can tell that Spider-Verse most definitely played a part in both opening the door for something like this to even exist, but also inspiring the creators to do something a bit different than what Marvel has been putting out animation-wise. But what about beyond Spider-Verse? Because there is way more here than meets the eye. Quote, "We started to draw from the influence of pop art like Basquiat, Andy Warhol, and Keith Haring, and the graffiti style and the comic book style. And then a little bit of Mark Hempel, a comic book artist, and UPA, and Saul Bass. The show has a broad variety of mixture of old and new influences. There are different influences of abstract art, so we all threw that in a blender and then made that happen. You can see it with the backgrounds. You have the textures, the layers, the halftones, and all that, plus the pen and ink style, and the spotted black dots on the characters. We think those styles marry each other, not compete against each other. And then with the animation style, you have a combination of the zippy and poppy. And then you'll have moments where you need to focus on the dialogue or the danger of the situation, and we slow it down. It is a little bit more fluid, and adding the modernness of the emoji pop-ups to signify communication was cool." End quote. I think the coolest part of this show existing to me is that it's 2D but managed to retain all of the sauce. I think these companies have gotten lazy in the off time between when we had shows like Kid Next Door, Foster's Home, and Ben 10. I'm not saying animators are getting lazy or artists, but the corporate heads have gotten lazy. So a show like this feels like a born miracle. This show is a marriage of so many different kinds of art and artists in the culture, and it shows itself in the most authentic of ways. We have these interconnected mixtape lo-fi bits between the scenes that both resets the mood after commercials and adds a fresh new flavor to the show that I didn't know I was missing. Music plays a huge part in the identity of Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur as a show, right down to the fight scenes, which, by the way, are absolutely phenomenal and will blow your mind every time. It's mind-boggling to me how, like classic cartoon shows of old, this show does have a set formula to lend itself to a sense of familiarity as a kid show, which is absolutely essential, while at the same time it constantly surprises you with how it executes those ideas in fresh and different ways. Finally, what makes this show so special, what gives the Moon Girl her magic, is the heart of it all. Her family, her friends, the endless love she has for her city, her home, her community, and despite the innate silliness of the show, which is not a detractor, it manages to feel also real, like you're just hanging out with your friends on a Saturday morning. So thank you, Moon Girl, for making me feel like a kid again, and giving this next generation of kids a show to fall in love with.